Welcome to the G5 Hive and our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into the G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review. Today, we'll be taking a look at the Green Wave of Tulane, who finished last season with an impressive 11-3 record and made an appearance in the Military Bowl. They wrapped up their 2024 spring practice with their spring game on April 20th. We have a special guest joining us today. He is the beat reporter for the Times-Picayune, New Orleans Advocate. He is the publisher of thewavereport.com for rivals. He is Guerry Smith. Guerry can be found at Guer Smith on X. Welcome to the show, Guerry.
Thanks for having me on the show.
All right. Moving over to the defensive side of the ball. As you might expect, there's a new coach leading the way for the Tulane defense, and that is Greg Gasparotto. Mm-hmm. He comes to Tulane from Troy as well, where he served as a defensive coordinator. And Troy has been known for their stellar defenses over the past few years. What can you tell our listeners of the style of defense we can expect to see from Coach Gasparotto?
Yeah, it's going to be pretty much what Tulane ran last year, because Tulane's defensive coordinator last year was John Sumrall's defensive coordinator at Troy the previous year. And they talked about that, how easy it was, the terminology and everything else. Usually when a new defensive coordinator comes in, everything changes. Obviously, every defensive coordinator is different, but the similarities were striking from what Tulane ran last year to what they're running this year. Because look, John Sumrall's a defensive coach too. So any defensive coordinator he has is going to run what John Sumrall wants to run too. So it's going to be, an aggressive. All coaches say that too. It's going to be an aggressive defense. Stop the run first, but the key is getting a pass rush. And Tulane has addressed that in the transfer portal, because the biggest concern going into Tulane had nobody returning that had more than one sack last year at defensive end, because they lost one guy to TCU, another guy to Houston, and another guy to the draft, who was never going to get drafted in the first place. It was a terrible decision, but that's going to be the key. I mean, Gasparotto, it doesn't matter who the defense coordinator is. If you don't have a pass rush, you're gonna struggle defensively, and that's going to be the key. But basically, Tulane, they're going to be the same defense they were last year in terms of scheme.
Well, let's move over to that line. And you kind of mentioned it. Devine Deal headed over to TCU. Yeah. Keith Cooper Jr. followed the staff over to Houston, and then AAC first teamer all conference Darius Hodges is off to the NFL. But there is some experience returning for the Green Wave in 2024 with guys like AAC first team all conference Patrick Jenkins. Yeah. You got Eric Hicks Jr., Cameron Hamilton, among others. How did that unit look in the spring, and did anybody stand out to you?
Looked really good. The defensive tackles they're going to be the strength of the defense. Patrick Jenkins is an incredible football player. He's another. He was at TCU. Tulane does not win the Cotton Bowl against USC 2 years ago if he doesn't break through the line and get a safety, which was literally the only way Tulane was going to win that game. USC could have actually dropped the ball on the end zone and let Tulane recover it and tie the game, and USC would have gone down the field and kicked a field goal to win the game and end. But that gave the ball back to Tulane, its offense, and they were able to go down and get the winning touchdown. But I think Jenkins is going to have a tremendous year. They've got another guy who did not have a great spring, but who is going to be a huge big timer, Adonis Freelow. And then in the last week of fall camp 2 years ago, he tore his ACL. When he came back, he wasn't the same player. Last year, he wasn't the same player last year. He didn't look great in the spring either, but those things can take 2 years sometimes to recover from. This was a guy they thought that Willie Fritz thought was going to be an NFL player before his injury. If he comes back, if he can get to anywhere close to the level he had before, they're going to have the best set of defensive tackles in the conference. Because you mentioned Eric Hicks is a good player in the middle. They're loaded at that position. They're talented and deep, and they're set there. Obviously, that should help. If you can't stop teams up the middle, you're in trouble too. They're set there. I think Tulane's run defense, as long as their defensive ends are functional at that position, Tulane's going to be really good at stopping the run this year.
Do you see any of the transfers that can maybe crack this offensive or this defensive lineup here? I mean, you got a couple. There's one from Troy that comes over, and then Tennessee State and Louisiana Monroe.
Yeah, it's the new guys. The guy from Troy is really talented, but he's very young. He's from New Orleans. And in the spring he showed some flashes, but he wasn't. I think he's probably a year away. But they got 3 guys from the transfer portal who come in with 2 of them with incredible numbers at a slightly lower level. But these guys, I think they're big timers. I mean, Terrell Allen from Tennessee State. I mean, he put up ridiculous numbers. I mean, 28.5 tackles for loss, 14.5 sacks. I think that'll get it done. Obviously, it's a step up, no doubt about that. But I think that's going to be huge because Darius Hodges was their best pass rusher the last couple of years. He was kind of inconsistent, kind of got up for big games, sometimes not as much in other games. I think Terrell Allen probably will be an upgrade on him as long as he can handle the transition. And then Aiden Huntington, all Tulane did was beat out Oklahoma for his services. Oklahoma gave him an offer he was at ULM last year. He had 8.5 sacks. And I think he's better than anybody that Tulane had in the spring. That's 2 guys right there. Then they got another guy, Javon Carter from Grambling, who's from Louisiana. Harder to read with him. He had 4 sacks last year. Which is still 3 more than any Tulane player returning had at the position. But as long as 2 of those guys can play, they don't even have to be great, but as long as they can provide some pass rush, this will be a complete defense. But it's still a concern going in because you don't know how the adjustment is going to be. But it wasn't just a concern at the end of spring practice. It was a deal that was going to keep them from winning a conference championship if they didn't hit the transfer portal.
All right, moving over to the linebackers, they do suffer some losses, but they bring back the duo of Jesus Machado and Tyler Grubbs. Machado and Grubbs were the top 2 tacklers for Tulane in 2023. How did the linebacker group look in the spring?
They look good now. Machado, I'm hearing he could be a question mark. He also tore his ACL in the Military Bowl last year. He was never going to practice in the spring, but he was expected back at the beginning of the year. It's a little murky on that now. There's been nothing official on it, but I've heard he may have had a setback at some point in his recovery. So it's a little unclear what his status is going to be. But if he does return, they're obviously they're set at that position. They had a bunch of young guys showed some pretty good signs in the spring. They had a bunch of young guys under Willie Fritz that obviously they didn't play a whole lot last year, but he thought every one of his linebacker recruits were going to end up being stars. And so I think it's going to end up being a position of strength for Tulane, but certainly Jesus Machado. I mean, he had 20 more tackles than anybody else last year. They need him. It'll be a blow if he isn't back for the season, because he's definitely a difference maker.
Did any of the young guys kind of step up, next to Grubbs, I guess, that you would?
Not specific. I mean, they've got about six or seven guys. It wasn't clear for sure which one was going to be the guy, but we'll have to wait and see on that. I mean, definitely, Grubbs is definitely the key, and they do need Machado to get back to full strength.
Well, let's talk about this defensive backfield. It was very experienced in 2023. 2024, they brought back Bailey Dispani, but this group had a lot of graduates, including AAC first-team All-Conference Guerry Monroe. You got second-teamer Lance Robinson. How did the staff address those key losses?
Yeah, that's probably the most unsettled position on the team. Bailey Dispani, he's been a surprise. I think he's been better than he was projected. He had a very solid year last year. At safety, they're pretty solid. But cornerback, their best cornerback in the spring was a guy named Rishi Ratan, who is a walk-on, and he's in his 5th year now. He was not a guy that was ever expected to be a play. I used to talk about, he probably leads the team in practice interceptions over the years, but it never translated into actual. They were never confident enough to use him in games. So he's probably going to be given a scholarship at the before the season starts, but that position is wide open for them because nobody else. They had a lot of injuries at that position. Lou Tillery played in the spring. A bunch of guys. None of those guys have proven anything in terms of proven college production. And Jarius Monroe was a tremendous player. And that to me is probably the biggest concern for the team going into the year, assuming these Russian guys are going to live up to their numbers. But then at the same time last year, I was saying safety was their big concern because they had no proven guys at safety. And then their safeties actually had an excellent year last year, led with Bailey Despaney starting that. But they don't have any. That's the one position they have no idea who their stars are going to be right now at cornerback. There's about 8-9 guys. They hit the transfer portal there too, brought in some guys, but not guys with the incredible numbers to proven numbers. It's going to be an absolute free for all at cornerback going into fall practice.
All right. If you had to pick a defensive player to have a breakout type season in 2024, who would that be?
Yeah, I think Tyler Grubbs is going to really have a monster year this year. He was a bit of a freelancer last year. He had big numbers, but he kind of did his own thing a lot of times. And I think new system sort of, again, it's pretty similar to last year, but I think he's really meshed well with the new coaching staff. They really trust him. He had unbelievable numbers every year he was at Louisiana Tech before he came to Tulane. Yeah. He says he doesn't, but he had a little chip on his shoulder because he was a New Orleans product. Tulane didn't recruit him at all coming out of high school. Willie Fritz said that was one of his biggest mistakes. They didn't think he was a Division I caliber player. And then he went to Louisiana Tech and put up 100+ tackles every year and was pretty close to that at Tulane last year. I think he's a guy, he could hit that 100 number level this year. And I think, and he did, he made plays last year, but he also made some mistakes. If he can cut out the mistakes, he's going to be an all conference caliber player.
If you are watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.